The quarterly family meetings started when I was 16. Dad called them Thompson Family Business Reviews. Formal presentations in the conference room of Thompson Enterprises, complete with PowerPoint slides and financial projections. A family business requires family accountability, Dad would say, adjusting his tie before each meeting. Everyone needs to understand their role in our success. My role, according to these meetings, was consistently disappointing. Emily's grades are slipping again, Dad would announce, clicking through slides that somehow made my B+ average look like academic failure. Private school tuition, $40,000 annually. Return on investment, declining. Stepmom Margaret would nod sympathetically. Perhaps we should consider public school options. My half-brothers, David and James, never faced these reviews. David was the golden child, Harvard MBA, already working as Dad's vice president of operations at 28. James was the creative one. His art degree was seen as brand diversification for the family image. But me? I was the financial burden. The reminder of Dad's first marriage. The daughter who cost money without generating family value. Emily's college fund has reached $200,000, Dad announced at my senior year meeting. However, given her current trajectory, we should discuss more cost-effective education options. Community college has excellent programs, Margaret suggested helpfully. Much more practical for someone with Emily's limitations. I sat quietly through these meetings watching Dad's company presentations. Thompson Enterprises had grown from a small construction firm into a real estate empire worth $500 million. Shopping centers, office complexes, residential developments across 3 states. What Dad didn't know was that I'd been paying attention to more than just his criticism. During these quarterly meetings, I heard about pending deals, expansion plans, cash flow problems. Dad treated me like furniture, discussing sensitive business information as if I couldn't understand it. The Phoenix project needs an additional $50 million injection, Dad would tell Margaret while I sat right there. Our traditional lenders are getting nervous about the commercial real estate market. What about private investors? Margaret would ask. We're exploring options. Anonymous investment groups, overseas capital. The key is finding money without giving up control. By my junior year of high school, I'd started researching Dad's business model. Not because I cared about the family company, because I wanted to understand what he actually did all day besides criticize me. Thompson Enterprises was impressive but fragile. Dad leveraged everything heavily, borrowing against properties to fund new acquisitions. It worked beautifully in a growing market, but one bad economic turn could topple the whole empire. More importantly, I discovered that Dad regularly sought anonymous investors for specific projects. Shell companies and investment firms that provided capital without demanding board seats or operational control. I started small during college. A $5,000 investment in a REIT that I'd researched thoroughly. It doubled in 18 months. I reinvested the profit and doubled it again. By sophomore year, I had $40,000 in a portfolio that was growing 300% annually. I studied finance obsessively, not because I loved business, because I was furious. Every quarterly meeting where Dad called me a burden, every suggestion that I wasn't worth the family's investment, every comparison to my successful half-brothers made me more determined to prove something. But not to them. To myself. By graduation, my portfolio had reached $500,000. I told the family I was taking a gap year to find myself, which made Dad roll his eyes and Margaret suggest I get a job at Starbucks to learn work ethic. Instead, I spent that year learning everything about real estate investment. I studied Dad's industry, analyzed his competitors, identified the exact market gaps that Thompson Enterprises was positioned to fill. When Dad announced at the next quarterly meeting that Thompson Enterprises needed $75 million for a new mall development in Austin, I was ready. Through a series of carefully structured shell companies, I became an anonymous investor in Thompson's Austin project. Dad had no idea that the $25 million injection that saved his mall development came from his financially burdensome daughter. The Austin Mall was a massive success. My $25 million investment returned $45 million in 3 years. I reinvested everything into more Thompson Enterprises projects. Always anonymously. Always through different shell companies and investment firms. Dad never knew that his mystery investor, the one he bragged about finding to expand the business, was sitting across from him at quarterly meetings, listening to him complain about her college expenses. By age 25, I owned $200 million worth of Thompson Enterprises through various investment vehicles. I was technically Dad's largest single investor, controlling nearly 40% of his company's debt financing. But at family meetings I was still the disappointing daughter. Emily's still living in that tiny apartment, Dad announced at last month's quarterly review. 25 years old, working at a nonprofit, no real career prospects. It's concerning, Margaret agreed. David was already making six figures by her age. I worked at a literacy nonprofit that paid $35,000 annually, barely enough to cover my modest lifestyle. What they didn't know was that I'd structured my investments to generate enough passive income to live comfortably while maintaining the appearance of financial struggle. Perhaps it's time for some tough love, Dad continued, clicking to his next PowerPoint slide. We can't keep subsidizing underperformance indefinitely. What do you mean? I asked. Your health insurance, car insurance, family vacation expenses. Small amounts individually, but they add up. The family is supporting someone who isn't contributing to family success. David nodded from across the table. That's right. Margaret and I both work directly for Thompson Enterprises. James's art connects to our hospitality properties. Everyone contributes except. He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung in the air. I think it's time to establish clearer expectations, Dad continued. Family support should correlate with family contribution. What kind of expectations? I asked carefully. Margaret leaned forward. Well, you could join Thompson Enterprises. Start in an entry-level position, work your way up. Prove your commitment to family success. Or, Dad added, we could help you find a more lucrative career path. Real estate license, business degree, something with actual earning potential. And if I prefer my current job? Dad's expression hardened. Then you should prefer paying your own expenses. Adults support themselves, Emily. The family business supports family members who support the family business. David and James exchanged glances. Margaret smiled sympathetically. This had clearly been discussed before I arrived. I see, I said quietly. It's not personal, Dad continued. It's practical. Thompson Enterprises is expanding rapidly. We're investing in new projects, hiring key personnel, building our legacy. Resources need to go toward growth, not maintenance. You've always been a financial burden to this family, Dad announced, clicking to a slide that somehow quantified my lifetime costs. Private school, college tuition, ongoing family support. We've invested significantly without seeing returns. Margaret nodded. This meeting is about establishing a new model. Real contributors only. The slide showed my costs over 25 years. $800,000 in education, housing support, insurance, and miscellaneous family expenses. Compared to David's slide, which showed his contributions to company growth, it looked damning. Do you understand what we're saying? Dad asked. Understood, I replied. Good. We're not cutting you off completely, Dad clarified. But starting next quarter, family financial support will be merit-based. Contribute to family success, receive family benefits. When do you need my decision? End of this week. Join Thompson Enterprises in a real capacity, or transition to full financial independence. I nodded and gathered my things. The meeting continued with discussions about David's promotion to senior vice president and James's upcoming art exhibition at the company's downtown hotel. As I drove home to my modest apartment, I thought about the irony. Dad's company was having its best year ever, largely because of the anonymous investments I'd been making. The $200 million I'd channeled into Thompson Enterprises over 5 years had funded their 3 most successful projects. And now he was threatening to cut me off for being a financial burden. Monday morning, I called my investment manager, Patricia Williams. Emily, good to hear from you. How did the family meeting go? Patricia was one of the few people who knew about my investment strategy. She managed my portfolio through Williams Capital Management, ensuring that all investments in Thompson Enterprises remained anonymous and legally protected. It went exactly as expected, I said. Patricia, I need you to initiate a complete liquidation of all holdings related to Thompson Enterprises. There was a pause. Emily, that's $200 million across 17 different investment vehicles. Are you sure? I'm sure. The liquidation will take several weeks to execute properly. And Emily, withdrawing this much capital simultaneously will create serious problems for Thompson Enterprises. Their expansion projects are leveraged against these investments. I understand. Their Austin Mall, Phoenix office complex, and Denver residential development are all financed through your investment structures. If you pull out, those projects will lose funding immediately. That's the point. Patricia sighed. What about the new Orlando resort project? They just broke ground last month. Your investment firm provided $75 million for that development. Liquidate everything. I want complete divestment from Thompson Enterprises by Friday. Emily, this will likely force the company into emergency restructuring. Your father will lose control of several major projects. Patricia, my father just informed me that I'm a financial burden who needs to prove my worth to the family. I'm simply reducing his burden. Understood. I'll begin the liquidation process immediately. Emily, this is going to be very public. Thompson Enterprises is a prominent company. When $200 million in funding disappears overnight, it will make business news. Good. Your father will eventually trace the investments back to you. Let him. I hung up and went to work at the literacy nonprofit. It was a normal day, helping adults learn to read, organizing volunteer schedules, applying for grants. My coworkers had no idea that I'd just triggered the collapse of a $500 million real estate empire. Tuesday morning, Dad called me at 6:47 a.m. Emily, I need to talk to you immediately. What's wrong? Everything. Thompson Enterprises is in crisis. Our largest investor is pulling out. $200 million gone. They're liquidating everything. Oh no. That sounds terrible. Terrible? Emily, this is catastrophic. The Orlando project is shut down. Phoenix is suspended. Austin might have to sell to cover debts. I don't understand what happened. Did they give you a reason? Williams Capital Management says it's a strategic restructuring, but the timing makes no sense. These were long-term partnerships. Why would they suddenly liquidate everything? I could hear papers shuffling, voices in the background. Dad was clearly at the office, probably in an emergency meeting. Is there anything I can do to help? Help? Emily, this is a $200 million problem. The company might not survive this. 25 years of building and it could all be gone. I'm so sorry. Is the family okay financially? The family. Dad's voice cracked. Emily, if Thompson Enterprises fails, there is no family money. David and James work for the company. Margaret's lifestyle depends on company profits. Everything we have is tied to these projects. What about emergency funding? Other investors? That's what I'm working on, but Emily, nobody has $200 million sitting around. This investor was our backbone. Without them, we can't complete any of our current projects. Through the phone, I heard Margaret's voice. Richard, the lawyers are here. I have to go, Dad said. Emergency board meeting. Emily, don't worry about the family meeting stuff from Sunday. We have bigger problems now. He hung up before I could respond. Wednesday's local business journal ran the headline. Thompson Enterprises faces crisis as major investor withdraws $200 million. The article detailed the company's sudden financial crisis, the suspension of multiple projects, and speculation about whether the company could survive. Dad's photo showed him looking haggard outside the corporate headquarters. David called me Wednesday evening. Emily, have you seen the news about Dad's company? Yes, it looks serious. Serious? Emily, I might lose my job. The whole company is falling apart. Dad's talking about selling everything just to cover debts. I'm sorry to hear that. The worst part is the timing. Right after Sunday's meeting, this mysterious investor destroys everything. It's like they wanted to hurt us personally. That does seem like strange timing. Emily, Dad is obsessed with finding out who Williams Capital Management really represents. He's hired forensic accountants to trace the money. He thinks someone deliberately targeted our family. Why would someone do that? I don't know, but Dad is convinced this is personal. He keeps saying the liquidation was too precise, too devastating to be just business. Thursday morning, Patricia called with an update. Emily, the liquidation is complete. All $200 million has been withdrawn from Thompson Enterprises projects. I've transferred the funds to your main investment account. How is Thompson handling it? Not well. They've had to halt construction on 3 major projects. The company's stock price has dropped 67% since Monday. They're scrambling to find replacement funding, but $200 million is difficult to replace quickly. What about the forensic investigation David mentioned? That's what I'm calling about. Your father has hired Blackstone Financial Forensics to trace the investment origins. They're very good at what they do. Will they find me? Eventually, yes. I structured everything legally, but if they dig deep enough, they'll connect the shell companies back to your personal accounts. Maybe 2 weeks before they have definitive proof. That's fine. Emily, are you prepared for the consequences? Your father will know that you secretly funded his business for 5 years, then deliberately destroyed it. I'm prepared. And your family will know you've been hiding a $200 million investment portfolio while pretending to be financially struggling. They'll figure it out eventually. Friday evening, James called. Emily, I need to ask you something and I want you to be completely honest. Okay. Do you know anything about Williams Capital Management? My heart rate stayed steady. Should I? The forensic accountants found something weird. The investment firm that destroyed Dad's company, it's connected to a bunch of shell companies. And one of those companies lists an E. Thompson as a beneficiary. Thompson is a common name. That's what I said. But Dad is convinced it's more than coincidence. He thinks someone in our family might be involved. James, do you really think I could secretly invest $200 million in anything? The question hung in the air. James was quiet for a long moment. Emily, you work at a nonprofit. You live in a 1-bedroom apartment. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. The idea that you could have that kind of money is ridiculous. Yeah. I told Dad he's being paranoid. But he's desperate to blame someone. I understand. He's going through a lot. Can you do me a favor? Can you call him this weekend? He needs family support right now. And maybe don't mention the financial independence conversation from Sunday. He's feeling pretty guilty about that timing. Of course. After hanging up, I sat in my modest apartment, looking around at my second-hand furniture and thrift store decorations. Everything in my living room probably cost less than Dad spent on lunch most days. But my bank account had just received $200 million. I called Dad Saturday morning. Emily, thank God you called. I've been meaning to reach out. James said you're having a difficult week. Difficult? Dad's laugh was bitter. Emily, I might lose everything. 25 years of building this company, and it could all be gone because some anonymous investor decided to destroy us. That sounds incredibly stressful. It is. And Emily, I need to apologize about Sunday's meeting. The timing, with everything that's happened, it looks like I was cutting off family support right before a crisis. You couldn't have known. Still, it was poorly timed. Listen, about the financial independence thing. Let's table that conversation. Your family. Family supports each other, especially during difficult times. I appreciate that. And Emily, I want you to know that if the company survives this, if we find new investors and rebuild, you'll always have a place here. I may have been too harsh about your contributions. What do you mean? I mean, maybe family value isn't just about money. Maybe having a daughter who works with underprivileged communities, who chooses service over profit. Maybe that's valuable too. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Dad, what if the forensic investigation finds something you don't want to know? What do you mean? What if the person who destroyed your company is someone close to you? There was a long pause. Emily, do you know something about this? I'm just saying, sometimes the people we underestimate the most are the ones with the most power to surprise us. Emily, if you know anything about Williams Capital Management or these shell companies, you need to tell me. Dad, why would I know anything about high-level investment firms? Again, the question created silence. Dad was thinking through the impossibility of his financially struggling daughter being involved in a $200 million investment scheme. You're right, he said finally. I'm just desperate for answers. You'll figure it out. I hope so. Because if someone deliberately targeted our family, if someone wanted to hurt us personally, that's unforgivable. It would be. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and checked the business news. Thompson Enterprises stock had fallen another 12% overnight. The company was officially in crisis mode. By Monday, the forensic accountants would probably trace the shell companies back to my accounts. Dad would learn that his financially burdensome daughter had been secretly funding his business empire for 5 years. And then he'd learn that she deliberately destroyed it in 4 days. I looked around my small apartment again. Tomorrow I'd go back to my $35,000 a year nonprofit job. I'd help adults learn to read and apply for small grants to keep our programs running. But tonight I allowed myself to imagine Dad's face when he realized the truth. The daughter he'd called a financial burden had been his largest investor. The family member he'd threatened to cut off for not contributing had been secretly funding his success. Sometimes the most expensive lesson is learning that the person you've underestimated the most is the one who's been holding your entire world together. And sometimes that person decides to let go.